Hey friends, my name's Ruckstar, editor-in-chief of Raving Lunatic Media. I'm here to talk to you today about ads. Whoa, Ruckstar. Ads? Are you guys selling out finally? No, dear viewer. We are just going to be showing our support to the amazing shows here on Raving Lunatic Media, like Sci-Fi Malady, Zodiac Task Force, Why You Should, and the backlogs of the Casatorium, with more to come out in the next calendar year. If you want these shows without these annoying breaks in the middle, you can follow the link in any of the bios of the shows or on our Discord, Raving Lunatic Media. You'll be brought to a subscription page which will help support your favorite creators, us. Enjoy the show and stay crazy, lunatics.
The summer of 2023 should have put to rest any doubts about climate change. There's wildfires in Canada and Maui. A hurricane is headed towards Southern California. July was the hottest month globally on record since 1880, with the average temperature exceeding that of 1951 to 1980 by 2.1 degrees Fahrenheit. In South Texas, there have been 51 days of temperatures exceeding 100 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a 23-year mega drought in the American Southwest that is the longest in 1,200 years. All of these should finally close the door on whether or not climate change is real and if man had a role in it. We did. But it just as clearly should send a message to climate change activists and Greens around the world that the solution they have been peddling for decades is not working. The goal of the Paris Accord to keep global temperature increases below 1.5 C or at worst 2 C by the end of the century is going to fail if we keep going the way we are. Even if we change, it's probably going to fail. What we're doing isn't working. Let me get this out of the way right now. Climate change is happening. It's a fact. It is a fact that humanity is driving the warming of the planet. It is a fact that greenhouse gas emissions and excessive carbon emissions are warming the planet. Sea levels are rising. Wildfires are increasing. Drought is increasing. The world is getting hotter and less hospitable. Some may say that this is not a fact and that sometimes the world just has natural warming cycles. They're fucking wrong. You can believe that if you wish, that this has nothing to do with us, and we're just in a natural getting hotter cycle. But you're wrong. Red is not blue, 2 plus 2 is not 5. The planet is getting really hot, and we are causing the temperature increase. The world is becoming less hospitable, and lives are being lost, and more lives will continue to be lost. Okay. We have this clear then. I believe in man-made climate change and that the repercussions are going to be damning. Let me be equally clear. Our planet runs on carbon. The myopic, single-minded obsession with eliminating carbon emissions has not, will not, and cannot work. Why? Because quite simply, we don't have the alternatives to immediately or even quickly decarbonize, and we don't have a unified world government to enforce it if we did. We don't have an enforcement mechanism, and we're not going to anytime soon. The United Nations is a joke. It's an absolute joke. If it wasn't, the war in Ukraine wouldn't be happening right now. The Uyghur massacres in China would not be happening right now. We don't have an enforcement mechanism. We have basically kids playing student council, but believing it's important. Even if we had an enforcement mechanism, and even if we had the ability to decarbonize in the next 5 years, it's already too late. The disaster is here. It is at our door. And one more thing, people aren't willing to pay the price to get there. And that's just a sad truth. Let's start with the gold standard that Greens and climate activists religiously preach as the solution to global warming: a carbon tax and a cap and trade system. Let's really oversimplify this and say that how this works is governments will set a limit on the amount of carbon emissions a company can have during a set period of time. If that company exceeds their max level, they're taxed for every emission after that level. Along with this tax, there's the creation of a carbon offset market that lets companies buy and trade these carbon offsets at a rate that is cheaper than the tax for going over it. This allows them to exceed the cap. It also allows companies that are ahead of the curve to make a little money selling their offsets what they'll be under the cap to companies that still need it. In theory, this also drives companies to invest in cheaper alternatives, energy sources, and production methods to avoid the tax. In practice, it simply makes everything cost more. The truth of the matter is that companies will always pass on the cost from higher taxes or regulations in the form of higher end prices to consumers. Every time. Never will a company just accept a lower profit margin. If input costs go up, the price of the finished good or commodity or service go up. Every single time. It would be a wonderful, great world if Greedy McGreedfuck, the CEO of Global Megacorp, would accept a profit margin reduction of 2% to do some good for the fucking world. But Mega Global Corp needs a fortress on the moon to capture future emerging markets there, so they need that 2%. They also need to pay the dividend, because you know what? He's got his eye set in a diamond-encrusted toilet bowl brush that he's never going to use to clean his toilet. He's got to have it. Greedy McGreedfuck needs more money. That's going to trump doing the right thing every single time. So the only thing that's going to happen here as a result of carbon taxes is things are going to cost more. Maybe not the only thing, but that certainly is going to happen. And in a time of rampant inflation, when people are struggling to cover increased food and energy costs and keep the lights on for their family, they aren't willing to pay more at the pump, more for food, or more for luxury products they don't need to fight a possible future catastrophe based on climate change explained by a science that they don't fully understand. Is it ignoring the problem? Yes. Is it dangerous? Yes. But the reality is that people don't care enough about climate change to pay more for things willingly when they see the harm that does right in front of their face to their children, or when it simply costs them that extra thing that they really want. We're crappy people. We're a crappy society. We're a crappy species. However, if the individual citizen is not on board with it, then governments can't be either. With the exception possibly of Great Britain, who seems to be anti-growth, the world, its citizens, and its governments are obsessed with GDP growth and per capita income growth and consumer happiness. Happy citizens are content, good little sheep and don't start revolutions or vote you out of office. Having them pay for bread is a good way to make them not happy. The Romans knew this. It's been known for thousands of years. People have enough to eat, they're happy. People don't have enough to eat, they riot. They don't care about a future problem making them have less to eat today because they can't eat today. They're hungry. The bottom line is that there's no true government or consumer support for a carbon tax. There just isn't. There's not enough people saying we really want carbon taxes. It's a liberal, idealistic dream that just doesn't have the majority support. If it did, we'd have it. Okay, Scott. Maybe all that's right, but we can surely at least invest in renewable energy, right? We can do something instead of doing nothing. Wind, solar farms, hydrogen? Absolutely. Yes, we can. We should. And we are. We're investing every day in more wind and solar farms. America's a laggard. We currently get 21.5% of our power yearly generated by renewable sources. Globally, that percentage is 29%. And it's great. If we keep making progress, eventually, someday, years down the road, we can actually move away from oil, coal, and gas. As we get more renewable capacity and it becomes more efficient and it becomes cost effective, the economy will move that way. The problem is we aren't there. There's a global energy shortage today. We have rolling blackouts in certain areas of America. We have rolling blackouts across the world. Some countries can only keep power on for a few hours a day. Most recently, a mild winter saved Europe from a calamity in 2023 that could have seen people die from a lack of heated homes. Families and children last winter were at immediate risk of dying from exposure to the cold due to a lack of heating fuel in Europe. Families and children are at risk of dying of heat exposure today when there's not enough power to run the AC. It can get really hot really quick and people can die. It happens. It happens in heat waves all the time. Wind and solar farms, they take up a whole lot of space. Wind farms take 2 to 40 acres to produce a megawatt of energy, and that's a key number. Solar farms take 6 to 8 acres of space to produce a megawatt of energy. A real basic calculation for what a megawatt of energy is we need 110,000 megawatts a day to power America on average. A 1 megawatt solar farm would generate 4 megawatts of power a day. So you've got somewhere between 2 and 40 acres for wind or 6 to 8 acres for solar to generate 4 megawatts of power a day. You'd need about 110,000 acres of solar farms. That's an area larger than the Mojave Desert. And this assumes that all the farms are efficient and that they receive 4 hours a day of peak sunlight to generate energy. With the windmills, it would assume that they get enough wind a day to generate peak energy. And as we'll get to later, they don't. So this is a best case scenario. An area the size of the Mojave Desert to replace all of our current energy sources. We can't do it. We can't provide the 110,000 megawatts now. The upshot of all of this is wind and solar are certainly part of a solution to the crisis that we have. But we also aren't currently anywhere near them being able to take over for coal, oil, and gas. We just aren't there. As much as activists would like for it to be simply a matter of making it too expensive for people to afford energy from oil, coal, or gas, and that will make them switch to renewable, and that poof, the solar and wind farms will spring forth into existence fully functional, that's not true. We don't have that magic wand. The capacity isn't there. Even if everyone in the United States wanted to pivot away tomorrow from fossil fuel and was willing to pay the extra cost and able, we cannot run the world, we cannot run America, let alone the world, on wind and solar. We can barely run the world combining all the methods we have today. We're not there yet. But we keep pushing this narrative of, let's get rid of oil, coal, and gas. If we make it more expensive, then magically alternatives will spring forth. It's not realistic. We have another problem here. Wind farms, and in some cases solar farms, take away land that can be used to grow food. And whether you believe it or not, food insecurity is on the rise worldwide. In 2022, 9.2% of the world's population faced outright hunger and famine. 29% of the world faced moderate or severe food shortages. It is estimated that there are 134 million more people it is estimated that there is globally 134 million more people in 2021 unable to afford a healthy diet than there were in 2019. Food costs more today. The food we feed our food costs more. All of our food is more costly and scarce. Russia is not renewing the grain export treaty. Rice, wheat, corn, soybeans. The cost of all of them are rising. The bottom line is that we cannot trade arable land for growing food for wind and solar farms when we don't have enough food today to feed the world. People are going hungry. That's not the time to make less food. The food supply is finite. Every single time you convert a farm to a solar panel farm, more people don't have food. We don't have enough food. We can't shift those resources until we do have enough food. We can place solar and wind farms on non-arable land that is not being used for food production. And we should continue to do that. But the reality is that the available space limits the pace and speed of this green conversion, and it limits ultimately how much of this energy load we can move to wind and solar. It just does. We cannot condemn millions to death from malnutrition today to head off possible future deaths from climate-related issues. In other words, we can't value the life 50 years from now more than we do today. We can't save a life 50 years from now by consigning a life today to death because they don't have food or affordable energy to live today. Further, we cannot ask people to be willing to pay more for food and energy when they can already barely afford to pay for it now in the name of fending off a crisis they don't understand. By now I can hear people yelling, "Okay, Scott, nothing can be done. Let's watch the world literally burn and like a lobster in a slowly warming pot wait to be boiled to death." I'm not saying that. I am saying we need to change tactics. We need to accept the inevitable. If the world were willing to give up a modern lifestyle, use less energy, endure hardship, mix in alternative protein sources such as synthetic meat and bugs, use public transportation rather than own a car, then maybe we could have hit the 1.5C or 2C target. But the thing is that enough people aren't willing to pay this price. There just isn't. There's too many people who are assholes like me. I'm not ever going to voluntarily take the bus and give up my car. I don't want to plan the extra time in my day to walk to a bus stop, wait for a bus, hope it's running on time, and have it get me to where I'm going. I don't care how reliable you make public transportation. There's extra time and inconvenience, and life is short. And when I have a car and I can just go where I want to when I want to without trying to figure out how to get there, I'm going to do that. I also don't want to, you know what? I don't like people. I'm not willing to take the risk that when I do get to the bus or the train, I've got to sit next to a dickhead. You know what else I'm not going to give up? Juicy cheeseburgers. I love cheeseburgers. I'm not giving them up. Not in its entirety. Find me another solution. You can take my car keys and red meat from my cold, dead hands. And please, don't try to sell me that plant-based meat or synthetic meat can replace actual meat. These Incrediburgers, yeah, they taste just like meat, the same way a boat ride on Lake Erie in September feels like a Caribbean cruise if you close your eyes and believe really hard. I know my car and cheeseburger are causing global warming and death. I don't fucking care. Find another way to stop it, because if you ask me to give that up, it's a non-starter. You ask me not to run my AC, it's a non-starter. I know how callous that is. I know how shallow that is. I know I'm part of the problem, but I'm being honest about it. And you know what? Very few people are willing to make those changes too. Certainly not enough for this ideal that everyone acts in the best interest of humanity. We're not there yet. It's not who we are. I haven't given you another way yet. I said there is one. What is that other way? It's multifaceted. It includes compromises and options that I don't like. It does mean me eating less cheeseburgers, driving my car less, maybe occasionally mixing in some public transport when it makes sense. I'll have to accept that to solve this problem. And it's called compromise. What it means is you don't get what you want and I don't get what I want and we're all unhappy, right? Okay, let's look at the solutions. The first thing we need to do is look into capture and storage and removal. We have existing technology that can capture and remove carbon from the atmosphere. We have abilities to store carbon rather than release it. We need to invest in that technology. We need to subsidize that technology. We need to encourage the development of it instead of discouraging it because it moves you away from the goal of just getting away from dirty energy. We need that energy, and we need to look into this. Is it as efficient as wind power when it comes to carbon? No. The best technology we have would reduce emissions at a fossil fuel plant by 10 to 20% if it were used. But you know what? That's a great start. And if you combine it along with things like increased renewable energy production, you're making an impact. We're ignoring this technology because it doesn't fit the playbook. A second plank, we need to begin investing in nuclear power plants. This is the big one. This is the solution. Yeah, I know. We've got 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, and they were disasters. But I'm going to give a cold dose of reality here. How many? 3. We've got 3 big nuclear disasters in the existence of the technology. That means it's largely very, very safe. A nuclear plant can generate between 4 and 8 million megawatts of power per year with 0 carbon emissions. They are far more efficient and reliable than any other source of power that we have, including fossil fuel. There is no more efficient way to power the world than a nuclear power plant. The U.S. Department of Energy found that nuclear plants produce maximum power 92% of the time throughout the year. Wind is just 35% and solar is 25%. It's not even close. It's not a competition. They have no chance to ever compete with that level of efficiency. The solution to the disaster that is currently playing out and will just get worse has been here for 75 years. It is nuclear power. It is safe, efficient, constant, reliable, and clean. It produces no carbon. We cannot be afraid of it anymore. We cannot let the fear of another Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, or Fukushima prevent us from investing in the technology that solves our fossil fuel addiction. Combining nuclear power with continued investment in wind, solar, and hydrogen sources, along with carbon capture and release, can allow us to eventually approach net zero over the course of many years. The unfortunate, pragmatic, real truth here is that in the meantime, whatever we do, staying on our current path, making fossil fuel illegal tomorrow, we're still blowing by 1.5C, and we're going to blow by 2C too. It's going to be more than 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer, and probably more than 2 degrees warmer by the year 2100. It's time to face that reality. As much as climate change deniers must accept that it is us that is causing the world to warm to unsafe levels, and that we have to actually do something about it, that means, in the end, using less oil, coal, and gas, even if people who make a lot of money from it won't get to make that money anymore. The activists and Greens need to accept that the method they have pushed for decades is bullshit and hasn't worked and is rejected by most of society. We don't want it. They don't want it. Society doesn't want it. It also doesn't work. It can't work. Continuing to stubbornly resist alternative solutions because they don't fit your political ideal of sustainable wind and solar generation, humanity eating less meat, and everyone loving and using public transportation is ignorant and fucking stupid. Society voted on it. They don't want it. This is called compromise. You get to try something else. Your preferred method isn't the one we do. And you know what? That means that the people on the right are going to compromise too. That means that they are going to maybe have to give up their gas guzzler. We're not going to have muscle cars. We're going to have to give up some of these things. We're going to have to eat less steak. We're going to have a little less material things. But that's the path forward. The refusal to try any other way in the face of sustained resistance to the Greens' preferred method is a failure. It is just as much a cause of where we are as the denial of climate change by the right. You are just as guilty as the right for pushing a solution that you know is a non-starter and you know logistically can't solve the problem as the people who denied the problem in the first place. Doing something, doing anything, even when it's the wrong solution or a solution that cannot get off the ground, doesn't make you better. You have to find a solution that can actually be put into play. It's great to sit around in your think tank and say, if we could do this, it could work. But the reality is, think tanks aren't reality. And some solutions, even though they would work, are non-starters because of how crappy we are as a society. Greens need to embrace nuclear power and capture and removal. We all need to embrace that drought, wildfires, extreme weather, and flooding are here to stay. We need to invest large sums of public money hardening our cities. We need to make them flood resistant. We need to plan to be drought resistant. We need to plan to be fire resistant. We need to do more preventive maintenance. It may ultimately be necessary to relocate millions of people in areas near the sea around the world in low-lying areas when the sea levels rise. And you know what? In America, we need to admit and accept that we and our allies caused this problem by abundant use of fossil fuel and not looking into other methods or the effects of it much earlier, and that we, the taxpayers, have a moral duty to help pay for the worldwide solutions, and it's going to be at a disproportionate cost to us compared to less risk nations. We're going to have to pay a bigger portion of this. It's going to mean higher taxes. Suck it up, buttercup. That's what's going to happen. The countries that flew high and got rich on cheap fossil fuel cannot now turn their back on the world. We caused it. We got to fix it. That cost is going to be high, but we must stop living in a fantasy world that fossil fuel is going away anytime soon, that net zero will be achieved by 2050 or 20 anything, or that we can stay below 1.5C or 2C if we just try really hard now and get our act together. We have to accept the reality of extreme weather and climate change that we have created. We need to take action to fix this. And again, that action includes investing in renewable energy. It might include a carbon tax. It might include me eating less cheeseburgers. It might include greater use of public transportation. It might include nuclear. There is no single bullet. It's time everyone fucking woke up and realized the way out of the mess we all made is all of us giving up shit we don't want to. It means the Greens need to stop running like Don Quixote at the windmills of net zero and an ideological shift to humans miraculously not being selfish assholes. Everyone taking the bus, eating bugs or plant-based meat, and looking for real, pragmatic, feasible solutions. Stop denying or sabotaging real efforts to solve the problem because it isn't the perfect one you want ideologically. Affordable gas, coal, and oil energy sources are needed for a long time still to make sure we have the energy we need. Deal with it. Once the Model T was invented, people didn't need to ride horses crapping all over the place and spreading filth and disease. It was good for public health for people not to ride horses. But we didn't kill all the horses to force people to buy cars overnight. We need to realize that what we are currently doing and our current approach is fucked. Otherwise, like a lobster in a slowly warming pot, we will all fucking boil to death. I'm Scott. I'm angry. And my blood type is Scotch.
Raving Lunatic.